Hi everyone. I'm going to take a seat. I've got a few notes to go through. I think it's important to start with a disclaimer. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not an American, and it's really critical that while speaking on contemporary US politics, I've been asked to do, because I was unable to come to the Global Inequities session yesterday, but I think it's really critical to acknowledge that I'm not American, and therefore probably making a few observations as an outsider. And that narrative is really important instead of me coming in and trying to impose my views on this country, which we all have. But I want to use this opportunity to outline some of the issues and observations that I see in US policy and American democratic institutions, and provide you some insight into how it's done differently in my country, Australia. And I think it will complement what Jeff's raised, some of the systemic issues that has been talked about, but also why they're less of an issue in the country where I come from. So, why am I here? As Janta mentioned, I co-founded an organisation in 2008 called YGAP. We worked on the sort of front line of ending poverty and alleviating poverty in some of the world's toughest communities. Importantly, working across Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia and Asia Pacific, we wanted to avoid the traditional traps and mistakes of international development organisations. And what we saw in the sector, a lot of organisations do, was reinforce neo-colonial approaches to development, which is built on an assumption that we, whether it's America or North Americans, Europeans, people in Australia, have solutions to problems halfway across the world. And we think that's quite absolute bullshit. The best ways to solve local problems are by finding and backing local entrepreneurs who are from their own communities, with living communities that can respond to these problems. So, running an organisation for 10 years, we found and supported 450 emerging entrepreneurs in some of the world's most difficult communities who are responding to problems around education, healthcare, good homes and housing, and job creation. And got behind them at a very early stage, providing entrepreneurship support and money to scale their ventures. So that significantly and measurably improved the lives of close to 1 million people living in poverty. But like a lot of entrepreneurs, I realised it was time to move on and stepped down middle of last year and went back to university and took a Masters of Theology and Philosophy at Oxford University, which led me to studying the intersection of faith and politics in the United States. So, writing a dissertation on this very fascinating intersection, I became more and more probably a little bit dismayed and disturbed by the state of politics around the world. And I think it's important to note that many of the issues and systemic problems that Jeff's mentioned are also being felt elsewhere around the world. And I guess what I wanted to do coming out of Oxford was answer my own questions, what I did in this time, what I did to make a difference in this time of unrest. So, I feel right now what is probably missing more than anything else is values and ethics in political leadership. And this is beyond just political leadership, this is more across societal leadership. I know we're speaking in context of Australia, right from politics to sport, and of course to religious institutions, we're lacking the courage to have moral and political leaders. And so wanting to do something about this, I accepted a voluntary position with the DNC, as Janta mentioned. Being a non-American citizen, I can't officially work on American campaigns, so I'm a humble volunteer in DC. Working on a faith and values forum that's going to be run in January, partnering with CNN, to allow the Democratic candidates to speak about how both their faith and values inform their public policy. And I think this is remarkably important. At a time where there's so much hype put on what their policy is, it's really important to have a national conversation about what are their faith, what is their faith, and what are the values that drive their public policy. As a backdrop too, I want to explain how most of you that are quite passionate about American politics, how important, as someone that admires America and respects the values and institutions of this country, how important it is to solve and to work on some of these systemic problems. Because what happens here in this country is felt quite around the world. And I know American citizens have the right to vote on all of their state and federal elections, but who they vote for has implications around the world. And national leaders have a tremendous ability to influence how we perceive issues and how we respond to issues. And there's a lot of pain right now around the world, I think we're all feeling. So it's probably why I'm giving up the next stage of my career to be here and volunteer with the DNC. I do acknowledge that's quite a partisan thing to do, so that's putting it in context. So, in terms of what I've been asked to do, provide some insight into US policy, I thought I'd just provide US politics, I thought I'd just provide three issues. Three distinct issues, and as I mentioned, outline why they are quite remarkably different to where I come from, Australia. I'll start with partisan politics. There is no need for me to explain how the US has shifted towards partisan politics and continues to shift. It's probably very apparent to you the two-party system we have in America. But I do want to acknowledge that I noticed how bad it can be. On Thursday morning, I sat in Congress to hear the first vote in the impeachment hearings in the House of Representatives. Whilst doing so, what disturbed me most was to witness how Republicans continued in this opportunity to question the vote, continued to criticise the impeachment process hearing. And I believe they did so because they know the substance is bad, potentially really bad. I think we're all quite aware that it's a constitutional right to explore potential misuse of executive power. Why is this different in Australia? How is this different around partisan politics? We have the important role of minority parties, and our both Houses of Representatives, our upper house being the Senate, and lower house being the House of Representatives, is full of members that are elected to Parliament that are members of minority parties. So often larger political parties have to go into the coalition to form governments. Secondly, we have an executive branch that is part of our legislative. Leaders are held accountable to members of Parliament. I know that the three distinct branches of Parliament, your executive does not have to be held accountable to the legislative process here in America, but in Australia they are. Every member of Cabinet is part of the legislative branch. So as such, any misleading response to a question asked in Parliament during question time, Parliament is of course our Congress, can lead to an immediate dismissal. Second issue is money, and Jeff did a remarkable job outlining the systemic problem of money in politics in the US, and he mentioned it might be bewildering to people from other countries how money influences politics in America. Hearing $60 billion spent along cent is bewildering, and I can echo the problems that will have. And I sat, as I lined up on Thursday to enter the House of Representatives, I met a aspiring politician, Mark Gonzalez, who is running for a district seat in Georgia. He informed me, in addition to what Mark has raised, that there are companies that fundraise on behalf of congressmen and congresswomen, or aspiring congresspeople like himself, and will take 75% of what is raised. So organisations that operate that on behalf of an aspiring congressman or someone in Congress will fundraise and use active political fundraising streams to fundraise for the congressman or congresswoman and take 75% of the money raised. So he explained that one of the candidates that he's running against, 9 different Republican candidates, are standing for the district seat that he's running for. One candidate has had one donation in the past quarter, that's $250,000. So $1 million has been raised and $750,000 has gone to this private company. This is rather disturbing, as I'm sure you can all agree. In Australia, how is this different? Prospective members of Parliament, or members of Parliament, MPs as we call them, are selected by their party. There are no public primaries, therefore there is no waste of money and time with long primary processes. Our elections, state or federal, are cut to 6 weeks. Just 6 weeks. So it is bewildering to us that primary hearings run for 18 months. And thirdly, we have caps on how much individuals and companies can donate to political parties, which are all made transparent to the public. So at any point in time, you can go online and find out how much an individual or a company has donated to a political party or political candidate. I know that this is something you probably love here in the US, Jeff. So, as such, no candidate can raise 20, 50, let alone $100 million to stand for their own, to run for their own election campaign. The third issue that I want to raise that has significant implications here in the US and less so in Australia is voter suppression. And it's a conversation that I had with Terence McKeely, who's the Director of Advocacy at Sojourners, an organisation that does work with the precipice and intersection of sort of faith and values in DC. He was explaining to me about the 2018 state governor election in Georgia. And I'm sure many of you are quite aware of the election run-up between Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams. He raised a number of issues that I thought was quite alarming, ranging from polling restrictions. Since 2012, he mentioned that Georgia has had close to 214 polling stations closed, affecting 1.3 million voters. 75% of the people affected were African Americans in their counties. The second issue was in registration. Failing to add people onto the voter register from 2018 in the state governor election. Many of these, again, African Americans and other minority groups. Third issue he brought up was purging, the process of removing voters from voting polls. In Georgia, people were purged if they hadn't voted in past elections, if they had failed to respond to a postcard from the Secretary of State, or if someone had moved within the county. Allegedly, I was informed, 500,000 people were purged in 2017, leading into the 2018 election, which was 8% of the Georgian population. And he mentioned that the Democratic counties were purged at a rate 4-1, which significantly and disproportionately target people of colour and elderly people who tend to vote for the Democrats. Other issues he brought up were the limits to resources, like less machines available in certain districts, intentionally understaffing polling stations, so queues for 3 hours to encourage people to go home, and some voters reporting they had to wait up to 5 hours to simply vote. Exact matching, names that didn't exactly match the role, sometimes due to just a hyphen. As such, they were forced not to, but weren't able to vote, and this again intentionally targeted minorities. Tens of thousands of students were not given the opportunity to vote, many of them who were predominantly Democratic leaning, and 84,000 separate complaints in the 2008 Georgian state election were made to the voter protection hotline. 84,000 complaints. Why is this different in Australia? We have something called mandatory voting in Australia. I know this would be a very contentious issue here in America, but every citizen has to vote, unless you're physically incapable of doing so. Even when you're overseas, you're forced to submit a postal vote, as I did in this year's federal election in Australia. We are one of 22 countries to have mandatory voting, but one of only 10 to enforce it. If you do not vote, you will get a nice little letter from our Australian government with a fine of $80. Secondly, we have an independent, non-partisan body called the Australian Electoral Commission, which manages all our voting poll registrations. And it's not left to the Secretary of State, as I know it is here, to limit and potentially inflict suppression on voting polls. So these three issues, as I've mentioned, ranging from partisan politics to money to voter suppression, three different ways it's dealt with in Australia. I know it will take a lot of wonderful people like Jeff and others to work on these issues, but I just thought I'd provide some insight to how it's done differently in the country where I come from. So thanks for having me here, and I look forward to meeting you all at the Bike Lunch.